Welcome to Breakout Room 2 for the Preparing for Crisis at the School and District Level session. I'm Emily Satterley with the P3 team, and I'll be your host for this session. I'll be recording our session and monitoring the chat box. If anyone has any questions during the session, feel free to drop those in the chat box, and I will keep an eye on those. Our presenter this afternoon is Linda Tyree, the Crisis Response Team Director for GREC, the Green River Regional Educational Cooperative. I want to thank Linda for being with us to present this afternoon. I'll keep an eye on the time and let you know when we have 2 minutes left, and we're excited to hear from you today. So now I'll turn the session over to you.
All right, thank you, Emily. I'm excited to be with you all. Let me see if I can make sure that I can see everybody. Surely you can see my screen. I think we've had plenty of time to set up. Can somebody give me a thumbs up that you can see that? All right, and like she said, my name is Linda Tyree. I'm the Crisis Response Director at GREC. I just want to tell you a little bit about GREC first before we get started, because I will be referring to our GREC Crisis Response Team and then kind of comparing that to what you might be doing at a district or school level. If you're not familiar with GREC, you know, there's 8 educational cooperatives. GREC is probably the largest. We do have about 60 full-time staff and about 20 part-time staff. I'm one of the part-timers. I also do work for the Center for School Safety. So I have seen some of your faces and names as I've traveled around the state working with threat assessment trainings. One of the things that I love about our GREC co-op is that we do have a crisis response team, a regional team. We're prepared to go in and help any of our districts, even outside of our region, in times of need. But we also want to build that capacity within each district and school. We know that a regional team is very important. We're working with some other co-ops right now, trying to help them establish their regional teams. But we also are supporting our districts. We have started a district network to where we can really train those districts on how to be prepared at the district level, and even the school teams, even school-based crisis response teams, because we know it's not a matter of will something ever happen. We know that something probably will happen. My first year as a school counselor, I had 10 students in my building who lost an immediate family member. So that first year was kind of baptism by fire, I guess. We just really learned how to respond to students in the middle of grief. And so I became very interested in grief. When we had the school shooting at Marshall County, my team, the GREC team, we were the first to respond, along with some other organizations throughout the state. They're just the very next day. That really changed my passion, not just with school crisis response, but into school safety. So they really go hand in hand together. We know that we have students who will die of either natural consequences, unintentional injuries, diseases. We also have the suicide rate. We need to be in considering that. So we really have to be able to understand that we are going to face crises in our schools and in our districts. So what we ask is, when we talk to superintendents about their agreement with GREC, they have an agreement with us that they will allow members of their district to serve on our team, so that they might have to be out of their own district during the school day. We are very conscientious about not having anyone respond more than 3 days in a row for their own trauma exposure. And we also say no one should respond more than 3 times a year. We don't want them out of their building, out of their own district, any more than that. So we talk to superintendents and ask for that agreement up front. And then we ask them, if you received a notification right now that somebody in your district has died, who's that initial person that you would want to reach out to and say, you know, we got to get something together. We've got to figure something out. That person, your first point of contact, is going to be our point of contact at GREC when we establish that regional team. So when do you need a crisis team? There are a lot of different things that you may think, okay, we can handle this. We know what to do if a student dies in a car accident, or we know what to do if we have a staff member who is struggling with cancer. But our team has seen a lot of different scenarios over the last 20 years. And so a lot of times we can give you best practice suggestions, or we can look at research, and we can also just go by our experiences, just to give you maybe some pros and cons of things that you're considering when you are responding to a crisis. So we have the question asked a lot, like, when do we tell students? Who should be the one to tell them? Who makes that notification, and when should we do that? Sometimes we have options that we can maybe have a staff meeting before school. Maybe we find out something on a weekend, or we find out something at night. But we've had incidences in our region where something happened. A bus driver died unexpectedly between her morning route and her afternoon route. That district didn't have time to prepare a staff meeting. They had to make decisions right away. We've had students who have overdosed in a school setting. How do you notify the other students? How do you notify their parents? What do we need to do to get that word out to where we can honor the family and still make sure that we have communicated that incident to people that need to hear that? Unfortunately, we have a lot of parents who have a police scanner. They're going to hear that there is maybe a helicopter landing and taking a student to Vanderbilt Hospital, and they're going to associate that with maybe something that they saw unintentionally released on social media. So we want to help those districts get that word out in an appropriate way. We've also had acts of violence that have affected a school setting. What if something happens off campus? Do we still have to address that when we get to school? We heard Wayne Yun talk about that even in the legal update, as things that happen off campus are going to impact our school setting. So how do we address those instances as well? We've also had the instance where we've had very well-intentioned family members say, you know, I want to donate something with maybe my child's picture on it. Or we had somebody during COVID who had a mask with a student's picture on it that had passed away, and they said, we want to give these to everybody in their class. We don't want them to forget our loved one. So how do we honor that request to honor someone or in memory of someone, but not re-traumatize our students who might have already processed that grief, and we don't want to re-traumatize them. So a lot of different ways that our crisis team is asked to respond or asked for best practice. We try to build capacity within districts by using what's called the Instant Command System. This is a picture of one that's used by FEMA. So we know an instant command, that wording is often used with government agencies. We know that we will be working with government agencies in some instances during times of crisis. So we want to use that same language. We want to have that common language with them so that we can say, okay, here's who our instant command is. No matter what the crisis, every crisis will have some instant command. Most of the time, principals, it might be a mental health professional if that principal has maybe designated someone else, but a lot of times it's going to be the principal. They're going to be that instant commander. They're going to need some people that can carry out those different operations within the school. This is a picture of the instant command system that's in the Kentucky Emergency Management Resource Guide. We like this. This is great. Again, this is available through the Kentucky Center for School Safety. But we really like even better one that was developed by the National Association of School Psychologists, NASP. This one actually adds another command staff person. Again, all of them are going to have an incident commander who's going to be that final person in charge. But we know we need to assign some things to different people. We need somebody to be that public information officer. We need someone who's going to be that safety officer. Maybe that liaison official who's going to be working with other community-based agencies. But if you notice, the one from the National Association of School Psychologists also adds a mental health provider. They're going to be looking at how can we make sure that we're not just meeting the physical safety of our students, but are we meeting the psychological safety of our students following a crisis? And what we really like about this form is they have a lot of different roles, even under each one of those: operations section, planning section, logistics. And they really say, make sure you've got somebody who's doing these things. We know in small districts, it may be the same person doing a lot of those jobs, but we need to clearly designate who's going to be doing what in times of crisis. We have developed with some help from our friends in Glasgow. They developed a crisis response instant command sheet that you can actually put in the names of your district personnel. So we encourage, this is one of the things we do with our team as we build that capacity within our districts, is we give them a blank one. I'll give you access to a blank one today. And we'll just say, here are the people that we need to have. These are the roles and responsibilities that we need to have in place. And we want to do that before we have a crisis. We really want to do some planning and preparation before that moment of crisis. Because in the middle of crisis, we are not going to be making the best decisions. We're going to be really having some knee-jerk reactions. And if we have some policies and procedures and some planning done prior to anything happening, we will be able to have less anxiety for our staff and our leaders, and we'll actually have less trauma for our students and our staff members who are going to be impacted by that crisis. So there are lots of different levels of crisis. We can say a school level crisis, we might have a student who breaks their arm on the playground. That's a crisis for that school, maybe for that classroom. We have district level crisis where we might have an incident where we might have a principal who has maybe become sick, maybe has died. We might have a community level crisis. We've had regional and state level crisis in our state. We've had impact from the tornadoes or from flooding. So regardless of the level of crisis, we need to be prepared with some simple predetermined plans and protocols of who's going to do what in these times of crisis. For us, for the crisis response team, we respond to all of those. It doesn't have to be a regional crisis for our regional team to come in and help, especially for some of the smaller school districts. They're going to have a school level crisis that they don't have the capacity within their own district to really support that school level crisis. When I was in a school, a small rural district, I had the GREC team come in and help me and my school when we had a fourth grade student who died. We had a kindergartner who died during a bus accident. We've had those teams come in because a lot of times I was a school counselor, so I was very closely impacted by that death, by that crisis. So I'm not going to be the best person to be able to support maybe my staff or students. So my role would be different during that crisis. Having a regional team that can come in and help support is very important. But again, having some things in place so that I know how to reach out to them. I already have some things in place so that I know how my school, my district will be able to react during those times of crisis. So who should serve on your crisis response team? If you're looking at a school-based team or a district level team, we want you to consider it won't just be your school-based mental health. Definitely will be included. We want those school counselors, those school social workers, school psychologists, your mental health counselors. Now we are very careful about having this be district employees. We know a lot of districts have a MOU or an MOA with community-based mental health. They are great support. However, in times of crisis, we often have to be very careful of who they're allowed to speak with, what permissions do we have. So we definitely want to have some school employees that we will have as our core team. And then we'll use those community-based mental health to support that. And again, sometimes we have even our clergy. During the Marshall County shooting incident, we had a lot of the community-based churches wanted to help. And many of those pastors had some counseling training. They were willing and wanting to help. So we had to decide, how can we best utilize their skills and keep the fidelity of our school system. So they were able to be able to support the adults in the community. Many of those churches that wanted to help, they brought in food for the staff and for the crisis response workers. So what you maybe the availability to your staff, you can maybe use some of those people that might be community-based resources. We also want to remember that it doesn't have to be somebody with mental health training. And I'll show you in just a minute that this is not counseling. When you're looking at crisis response, this is not therapeutic services. This is triage. This is psychological first aid. So we encourage our district level administrators, our principals, assistant principals, We have a lot of different people at the district office who just have a heart for people. That's really all you need, is just to say, okay, I have these skills. I may not be a mental health professional. I may not be the person who needs to sit one-on-one with a student who is grieving, but I can still be support. I can still maybe be that person who can walk around and do some emotional check-ins with my staff or my administrators. Don't forget about your classified staff who might have a heart for others, that might have a heart for this work. Your family and community liaisons, your family resource centers, your school resource officers. Those people are going to be very important to be include on this team, especially your law enforcement, because a lot of times during a time of crisis, you'll have to rely on those partnerships with your emergency management personnel. So what do we do? Like, what does a crisis team do when we're called in? You'll notice right below the picture, I will tell you personally from our GREC crisis team, we go in under the direction of and only by invitation of the host district. So any decisions that are made are always going to be the host district. Now, if you're looking at a district or school-based team, what will you do? Just like our GREC team, we provide guidance and support during those times of crisis. Because a lot of times if we go in, we didn't personally maybe know the person who maybe was most impacted, maybe someone died in your district, we may not have had that relationship like you've had with them. So we're able to maybe be a calm presence when maybe everything in the school seems very chaotic. So a lot of times we're just going in, we're going to be observing those cultural norms, what's expected in the school. How do they want our support? We're going to ask them that. So we want the district team to also say, what will our role be? Maybe our role might be, we're going to help reading a notification. We know that when there has been a crisis, we need to communicate as much as possible. The more information we can give in that notification, the less anxiety we get when we hear that notification. We know that the unknown causes a lot of anxiety. So the more we can let them know without any gory details, but the more we can let them know, the less anxiety, the less trauma impact they will have. We know that best practice says that notification needs to be made in small, naturally occurring groups. We say a lot of times that's a classroom. We want to avoid doing things over a PA system or in a large auditorium. We know that there's a lot of psychological impacts that we can have when we're sitting next to somebody who might be more highly impacted than I was. I'm going to feed off their emotional state. So we want to do that in small, naturally occurring groups. Our teams may be just hosting a room, or they may just do a walkthrough. If we do host a crisis room, if we have a place where people can come, what we might call tier 2 services, tier 1 would be in the classroom making that notification. Tier 2 might be, you know what, they weren't able to process it in the classroom setting like most students, and we know that most people can process grief with just their naturally occurring social supports, but some people need a little additional help. So if they need that, we might host a room. Maybe that room will be a private room. Maybe it'll be a library. Sometimes we set up in the library, or we set up in an area that most students are not going to be walking through, and we can provide some individual or maybe even small group counseling for those students. When we are providing those services, again, we are not providing counseling, we're providing psychological first aid. So if you picture first aid, it's very much like a first aid course. If we think about first aid, we learn how to maybe do CPR, maybe how to stop the bleed. What we're doing is preserving life, preventing further injury, and promoting recovery. Psychological first aid is the same. We're not learning, if you take a first aid course, they're not going to teach you how to do an appendectomy. If you take a psychological first aid course, and I'll show you the model that we use at GREC, you're not going to learn how to do counseling or therapy, but you are setting the stage for recovery. That initial response really does set the stage for recovery. We use something called the SAFER model. It's an older model. It's been around for a long time. It's just a quick little review for us. And sometimes we try to review this a couple times a year with our team. Again, being prepared before a crisis is going to be crucial. But we want to make sure that we stabilize the situation. When I go into a school, I'm a stranger. If you are a team member that's from a school or from that district, you might have already established that relationship, but we still want to spend some time building rapport. Sometimes that'll be making eye contact, and sometimes it's shoulder to shoulder conversations. When eye contact might be a little bit uncomfortable for some people. We do want to be able to reduce distractions as much as possible when I'm having that time with somebody. I really am having that time so I can hear their story. This is why we prefer to do that in individual sessions because, again, my story might be different than someone else's story. My impact would be different than someone else. And if I'm listening to someone else tell their story and they were highly impacted or highly emotional, that will definitely affect me. So we're going to validate their feelings. A lot of times we just say, what you are experiencing are natural reactions to an unnatural event. We want to normalize their reactions as much as appropriate. Sometimes we just explain that, what, it's okay to be upset. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to not be able to focus in class right now. That's okay. This is part of the healing. It's part of a process. We do want them to have some coping strategies. This is usually not the time to teach them. It's usually just to say, listen, we know that, you've probably experienced some things in the past. What helped you through those other situations? We're going to pull on their social strengths, on their family support. We always want to remind students of the support that they have because our team may leave in a couple of days. If you're a district team, you may leave the school in a couple of days. If you're even a school-based team, they're going to get back into routine in a couple of days. And we just want to say, hey, if you're ever feeling this way again, here are the resources that are available. We definitely want to reestablish normal routine as quickly as possible, as quickly as healthy. We always recommend that we don't cancel things, that we don't change the normal routine, because again, we know some students are going to have less impact and some students are going to have more. So we offer support without removing their normal routine and functioning. And then we're always cognizant of when do I need to refer out? When do I need to say, you know what, this is maybe somebody who's not able to go back to their classroom right now. I might need to refer for a little bit more support right now. Maybe I need to go ahead and make that phone call to parents. So again, we want to just use this psychological first aid model as we meet with students. But not everybody on our team will be meeting with students or adults for that matter. We highly recommend that our district teams receive PREPARE training. PREPARE is a curriculum from the National Association of Psychologists in Schools. We love this model. We use it even with our GREC team, but just to be honest, it's really designed more for a district or a school because it's very comprehensive. It goes all the way from prevention strategies all the way to really examining the effectiveness of your crisis response plans and preparedness. So this is very well researched. It is mainly for schools. It is created specifically for a school and district team. We offer that through GREC. NASP offers that training. We have one coming up at GREC this summer in June, the 20th and 21st, for anybody that's interested. I think we're going to be doing that for OVEC and maybe Western Kentucky as well. So it is an excellent training that really goes more in depth on establishing that crisis response preparedness at the district level. It is so important to have a well-trained team. Whether you use PREPARE, whether you use a safer model like psychological first aid, or you just talk about what are the procedures, how are we going to use that incident command system, who are going to be those people in those roles. We need to be meeting on a regular basis. I am a firm believer in scenario-based training, just to get our team together and say, what would we do if this happened here? How would we respond? Working through those scenarios in our mind can kind of give us an idea of, okay, what would we do if this happened? Or what if, when we think about our crisis management protocols, let's say in our schools, we have a fire drill. That's something we do. We drill so that we have that muscle memory of what to do when that crisis occurs. Every once in a while, we need to block the primary route and have to use the secondary route. It's the same thing with our crisis response. We want to say, okay, if everything runs smoothly in this crisis, as much as things can be smooth in a crisis, then here's what we're going to do. But let's put a kink in it. What would we do if this happened? What would we do if this other thing happened? So just talking through those, a lot of times we'll get some responses. We have a big team at GREC, and so we feed off each other. We learn from each other. We want to hear from districts. We always want to have, there's so much power in debriefing. What worked well, what didn't work well, how can we improve this in the future, not just for us, but for anybody else who might experience this. We also want to provide resources for our team. If you're looking at a school-based or a district-based team, they're going to need a few resources. They're going to need that training. They're going to need maybe a couple books. I love The Rabbit Listened. It's one of my favorites. There are others. A few years ago, we gave all of our GREC crisis team members a backpack, and we had some things in it for them. We put some paper and some markers. Some kids, when they need to express their grief, they want to draw a picture or they want to write a letter. We want to give them those outlets for being able to process that grief individually. And then again, if we need to do something on a bigger scale, that would be maybe a follow-up. We also want to recognize our team members. This is a picture of some team members that served our district or in our region in the 22-23 school year. At the end of every year, we always try to recognize those people. We want to build camaraderie. When we meet, the work that we do is heavy work. So when we meet, we want to have some lighthearted fun with each other. We want to build that camaraderie, build that team, because these are the people who are going to be serving together in some really difficult times. And, there is that bond that occurs when you go through a crisis together. I know I still go out to dinner probably at least once a quarter with some of my friends that I served with in Marshall County, just because that was an experience that really bonded us. We went through that together and we were able to process that together. So we want to recognize our team members, and that could be, again, at a district or school level, just to say, hey, we appreciate, even if you haven't had to respond to a crisis this year, you went to trainings, you were prepared, you went through those scenario-based sessions that we had together. So we want to appreciate and recognize that. Now, I will quickly, I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I want to let you know, our team is activated when superintendents request that. I send out a Google sheet to let people know, hey, we need your help. We give them a little thing about here's what happened, here's the people that we need, and here's when you need to be there. That's how we notify our team. Again, we ask our responders to really consider their own trauma exposure before they respond. We want them to think, is this out of my region? Is this too far? Do I have prior commitments that mean I can't be there? You don't have to come to everyone. Just because you're on a team doesn't mean you have to respond every time that there's a crisis. If you're on a school-based team, again, even in my position as a school counselor, when my school experienced a crisis, I may not have been the best one to respond. I might have needed those other people to come in and support me during that time as well. We make sure that every piece of student information stays in the school. We don't take anything out with us. We use a documentation form so that we can leave that with the school counselor. Hey, here's the people that we think that maybe would benefit for some follow-up. We want you to know who we saw, when we saw them, which crisis team members spent time with them. What I really hope that we can do for the last couple of minutes, and maybe if you have a 10-minute break between, is really look at this grec.org crisis response page. We now have, hopefully you can still see this. We now have a crisis response page linked to our website that really gives you the information that you would need. It tells you about our team and how even the agreements that we've made with our superintendents. I'm going to go to this district coordinators page and just show you that we have a real quick little I'm a huge fan of one-pagers, especially when you're in the middle of a crisis. You don't have time to read pages and pages. Now, we do have lots of resources, lots of sample statements that you can use, whether it's a suicide, whether it's a violence-related death. We want to make sure there's that blank worksheet for incident command system, a debrief guide. But I love this just real quick little 10 10-step thing. What do I do when there's a crisis? How can I respond? And we've tried to put in as brief a manner as possible, just some best practice. We want to make sure that you know, one of the questions we get more than anything is, can we release the name of a deceased student or staff member without getting that parent permission? Because we know that the parents or the family is struggling during that time. And the answer is yes. Once it has been confirmed by authorities, you can. Now, we always encourage that liaison be assigned to the family. We want there to be a person from the district that works with the family. But we also know that we don't want to put those decisions on the family. We want to say, here's what our policy, here's what our procedures are. We want to let their friends know, and here's what we're going to do. We want to take control of that because, again, one of my favorite quotes is, our responsibility is to the living. So that's my reminder that we're about out of time. If you have any questions at all, I hope that you will try to navigate this website. We have a page for teachers and even parents. Please feel free to reach out to me. Again, I would love to work with your co-op or your school or your district and really establishing maybe some preventative protocols and procedures for crisis response.
Thank you, Linda, for sharing with us today. We do have a 10-minute break built in, so you all are all welcome to join your next breakout room when you're ready. If you'd like to stay a few minutes to ask questions, you're welcome to do that. Does anybody have something that they'd like to ask or add?
Yes, I will stick around for a few minutes. And again, my contact information is on. You already have a copy of the slides. They're on the EdCamp. There's some references if you need those, but definitely reach out. That's my cell number and my email. If I can be of any assistance, I'd be happy to do that.
This is Tim Peebler. I'm at Muhlenberg County High School. I did see your slides. One thing that I would like to say is sometimes we don't consider the military personnel that are JROTC instructors. We've been through a lot of trauma scenarios. First aid is really good. We know how to react, do triage, how to assess casualties and everything. And it would be a great asset in the schools that people sometimes don't realize. And because people don't mention it, a lot of people don't think about it and know the experiences that we've had. So for me, when I was getting out, because I retired as a first sergeant, I went and did I got my master's in psychology for writing on PTSD and the reintegration of families and how we could do that. That would be something that, sometimes not looking at the experience and just thinking they're just, teaching marching and everything. That's not exactly all we do. So I just wanted to put that out so that that might be something that thought about when you're doing that. And security, door securities, just evacuation plans, all those things we're really adept at.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Again, when you look at the total emergency management protocol, there are so many people that we don't want to forget their skills and their expertise. And Timothy, I think also when you're talking about military, you can also think about just the help that could be with the postvention, with following up with those people. Again, because of the experiences that you've had, you're going to know that, that journey doesn't end the day after the crisis or the day after the funeral. There are going to be some things that we're going to have to work out for maybe weeks and months and even years. So that's a great point. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no problem.